Hey everyone, how's it going? Shuffle's back here with another video, and we are back with part 2 of our 3-part series on the tier list / champion reviews for 2022. So today what we're going to do is we're going to do all of the 4 stars in all the elements. Again, if you haven't seen the last one, we did all the 3 stars as our last video, so make sure you check that out. I will leave it in the comment section down below. Also, we're going to start with fire. And then we're going to go into water, wind, light, and dark in order from top to bottom. So if you're looking for a specific unit, you can find them that way. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy the video. And let's jump right into it, because this probably isn't going to be a short one. All right, so here's our fire units. Leading off with Fire Corvus. He used to be really good for a short period of time. He got nerfed. Long story short, you don't need to build him anymore. He's just not good. Dingo. He's actually better than people give him credit for, kind of underrated. He's got a very interesting kit. He's hard to kill, kind of bruiserish. He does get outshone by a lot of the fire bruisers in the 5-star category. But if you're looking for a fun fire bruiserish unit, you could use him. I don't recommend it, but you could if you wanted to, and he is annoying and hard to kill. If you ever face one in RTA, be worried, because he's probably... Usually when people build units like that, they put some good gear on them to test them out. Up next, we have Fire Kawazu. Fire Kawazu is not very good. Really not worth building. He does have a defense break, but it's single target. And then he has a passive attack buff. But like, this kit just doesn't bring enough to the table to warrant using your resources on. He's also got pretty low base stats. So yeah, moving on. Fire Maya. So Fire Maya actually gets some use. If you are looking for a fire tank, she's quite good. She's actually a pretty good base speed for a knight. 112 base speed is really high for a knight. So being able to go first and having a, what does that skill up to? 75% chance to provoke the enemy with really high base speed kind of catches people off guard. And she also increases defense of your entire team. So really fast defense buff with AoE provoke in the same skill. Somewhat similar to what Fire Cecilia does. Again, Fire Cecilia just does the same thing but better. She puts up immunity instead of defense buff, but Fire Cecilia also has a 2-turn strip and a attack break and a slow as well. So if you have Fire Cecilia, you probably would be better off building her, but Fire Maya can also do the job. Up next, we have Kiwana. So Fire Quan is interesting. She got a buff. I think it was buff. Either that or just nobody paid attention to her. But she's got crazy base speed. 123 base speed. If you're looking for an AoE opener to boost your CDOM, she could be your answer. Also, she can get an extra turn. So, text enemy with the Flame Guardian, dispelling 2 buffs before stunning. So if they have immunity, even if it's with FCC, Kiwana here can strip stun whoever the fastest unit was, or is, and whoever you're speed challenging, hopefully you outspeed because you've got 123 base speed. Also, if you happen to have a fire team, increases CR of all your allies by 20%, and damage based on speed. You're not gonna, in that build, you're not gonna build it for damage. You could build it for damage. If you're trying to run an all-fire team, we talked about that in the 3-star video with Hazel. You could run Kiwana, Hazel, and a couple other fire units, and you've got a nice combination of stuff going on there. But odds are you'd be running this girl more as an opener to open, strip stun, whoever their fastest unit is. But also, she can do this skill too. Attacks all enemies with a Flame Guardian before increasing attack of all allies for 2 turns. When all allies are fire, grants all allies skill no. Again, could be fun in all fire team, but don't really worry about that. The part that makes this interesting is can grant an extra turn if you burn into it. So if you happen to have a mage on your team and you want to go AoE to boost your CDOM and then burn extra turn into a stun, you could do that. But it just allows her some flexibility as an opener. If you draft her, say for RTA, you can either do the strip stun if you feel like that's a better option, depending on speed tuning, or you can go with the AoE, or you can go with both. So, a very fun opener. She's not meta by any means, but you could use her. Up next with Fire Siren. So Fire Siren, the tied for the largest speed imprint in the game at 14 speed. In the last video, we talked about the 3 stars and how all of their imprints were 8 speed. So this is almost double what the 3 stars have in terms of speed imprints. So if you're trying to catch someone off guard and go first, she is fantastic for it. Also similar to Kiwana, her skill 2 here for 20 souls, you can burn into an extra turn. And this can actually do enough to double kill Arby. I used to use her in RTA when Arby was a little more prevalent. I'd use her as my speed imprint, and then I would burn into her and double kill Arby. And people never saw it coming. It's actually quite funny. And she has probably some of the coolest animations in the game as well. I love her animation. Here, quick timeout, just because you gotta. If you haven't seen it, you gotta see it. First of all, super cute. I don't know. I love the weapon thing. I don't know what it's called. Does it even say what it's called? No. Oh well. Anyway, back to the subject at hand. Sorry, Siren. Um, where'd she go? Back to 4 stars. Fire. Man, okay. We can't get distracted anymore. Up next, Fire Shuri. So Fire Shuri is the other unit that has a 14 speed imprint. He's your more traditional speed imprint. He has a lot of turn cycling. Normally, people use him early game to turn cycle in dungeons. He can burn into an extra turn, which is nice, but basically it's his passive. Every time he crits, boosts the CR by 15% of all allies. So he's got an AoE, plus he's got this, and he can poison. He's not likely to poison, it's a low chance, but you can use him as a poisoner as well. And he's got pretty good base speed. So again, if you're looking for speed imprint, he is an option. He isn't gonna single target nuke anybody. He doesn't have extra turns, but you could build him on high damage, and he can still do big damage with his skill 3 here if you build him on high enough damage. Moving on, we have Mercedes. Now, it doesn't show this here, but there are a couple versions of Mercedes. She basically gets a specialty change in Chapter 3. So if you aren't at Chapter 3 yet in the story, you can't do her little specialty change yet. It's really easy. It's just finish the story. But she does get pretty good once she is done the story. So she has her skill 3, which attack buffs all allies, which is really nice, and it's got decent damage on it as well, on only a 3-turn cooldown. I actually use her quite a bit in RTA, using her as my secondary attack buff. So I'll bring like either a DN or an Elena or whoever I bring as my attack buff, and if they get banned, I have Mercedes geared just a little bit faster than my other damage dealers, so that she gets a turn, gives them all attack buff plus AoE damage. And then I don't have to worry about bringing 2 attack buffers or having my attack buffer banned. And then her skill 2, also really good. Attacks all enemies with light sphere with 55% chance to dispel 1 buff. Plus, if she has attack buff, this goes twice. So she can technically strip 2 buffs. Can also burn into it an extra turn, which is also really good. And if she goes twice, it's going to do a lot of damage. If you're wondering if it can double kill Arby, it cannot. So the first attack kills, she would do her second attack before Arby revives himself. Same with like a maid revive or anything like that. So it doesn't work that way. But this does do really big damage. Plus, she has her special artifact that you can also get when she does her little specialty change thing. And that artifact allows her to counter at any time. So she can actually counter attacks. So I'm trying to think of an example. But like whoever, say you're going into Bellion, that you hit someone with somebody else, your opener, Bellion counters you, and Mercedes can actually counter that counter. So kind of an interesting mechanic. And she counters with her S2. So the ability to strip on her counter is really nice with an AoE strip. And then finally, her S1 actually hits 2 targets, so because of this, also really good in Expedition, in the green Expedition, because she will hit the crystal every single time, which boosts your damage with all 3 skills. So really nice there as well. Plus, she brings a secondary attack buff, and most people run that Expedition with Tamarin, who can't use her attack buff for the first bunch of turns. So being able to go Mercedes early and have the attack buff the entire fight is just going to boost your damage and make the team even better on top of her damage. Up next is Cirilla. She's a kind of limited unit from one of the stories. She's not very good. I don't recommend building her. She does have a burn, but she's kind of bad. She's been buffed once or twice, and she's still not good, so don't bother building her. Up next, we have our first of many cleansers. This one, Fire Katie's really unique kit for cleanser. She does have the full dispel and heal, which is really nice on only a 3-turn cooldown, and can burn into a bigger heal. But what makes her unique is this invincibility skill. So this invincibility is just single target, but along with it decreases the skill cooldown of whoever she puts it on. So if she puts it on herself, it decreases the skill cooldown of this, which means that the very next turn she can use this again. So she can just spam back and forth. It also decreases the cooldown of her own skill too, which, because it's being used in the proper process, it probably shouldn't. They probably didn't intend it to work that way, but they never fixed it. So if you want to take advantage of it, you can just skill 2, skill 3 over and over with her. And she will always either be cleansing and healing or be putting up invincibility. But yeah, very good otherwise. And she happens a nice utility with an attack break on her skill 1 if you happen to need it. And final unit for the fire units was a limited unit again, collab they had with Kizuna AI. Unfortunately, she's also not good. It looks like she could be good, but look at that speed. One of the worst base speeds in the game at 88 base speed. Why are you so slow, Kizuna? Anyway, that is it for the fire units. Let's move on to water. First up, Clarissa. Clarissa used to be one of the best 4-stars in the game. She kind of got power crept. She does have an exclusive, but it's really not enough. She's still good for Wyvern, as she does have a defense break on her skill 1. It is a 2-turn defense break, but it's not the highest chance. It's only 50% chance to land. And then she does have bleeds on her skill 3, but she's never going to get her bonus damage off. I think where she's best is probably some sort of wave content where she can use this skill kill with her skill 3 and then proc her extra turn. But she's really hard to use now. I'm sure you could build her up and put insane gear on her and make her really strong, but you don't see it very often. Next, we have Crowsit. So Crowsit is a unit that you can get for free from the little table there in the main screen. The reason is he can be your Wyvern tank. So we talked last time about Terranor Guard and Alexa and whatever the new girl's name is. But Crowsit here can be your frontline unit that takes that attack and takes the damage. He's basically just a tank. He's got defense buff, barrier, attack break, everything you need in a tank, and he's a 4-star, so he's relatively easy to acquire. And yeah, that's pretty much all you need to know about him. He isn't really used anywhere else in the game other than Wyvern, but with Wyvern being the most important dungeon in the game, that makes him viable. All right, Rose is up next. Rose is a tricky one. She does have an exclusive as well. You can see she has really slow base speed. The exclusive does help with that, as you can get up to 10 base speed from it. It brings her up to 107. But for the job that she has, it's really not fast enough. She has a CR boost with attack buff, AoE. So, and 2 cleanses. This one cleanses 2, right? No, I lied. So 1 cleanse, this one cleanses. So the skill 2 cleanses with barrier. This one just CR boosts, gives herself defense buff and attack buffs the entire team. she's fine for wave content, and I know there's a few people out there that use her or used to use her in RTA, but for the most part, she's pretty easy to counter. Um, and I don't really recommend building her unless you're building her for like PvE content. Next, we have Blue Collie, the bomber that doesn't apply bombs. So we have a couple bomb champions in the game, and then we have this with literally a bomb on her skill, and it says attack standing with a dagger and bomb, but there's no bombs. So don't let it trick you. Maybe she'll get a buff in the future, giving her bombs. That would be fun. She kind of needs a buff. She could be a good wyvern damage dealer. She can actually hit quite hard, but she's got this weird dual attack imprint. Her base stats are okay, but she doesn't have the insane base speed of her sister, Assassin Collie. Um, and so because of that, she really never gets any play. Her main use is imprinting Assassin Collie. Next, we have Blue Green. Green is a fun unit. One of my first, I think she was actually my first 4-star that I ever summoned in the game. Carried me through a ton of content. Has a new exclusive as well. She has this skill 3. This skill 3 can do big damage. And her skill 2 can defense break and proc into an extra turn. So if you happen to have a copy of the artifact RNL, you can put this on her, and it resets the RNL counter every single time. So she can end up proccing ridiculous amount of turns over and over and over again. Defense break into nuke into defense break, and yeah, she's really scary and really hard to deal with, actually. If you happen to face her in PvP. For the most part, though, she doesn't get any play in PvP because she's just a squishy damage dealer, and there's a lot of those out there. The main place you'll see her is in Wyvern, mainly for the defense break. Speaking of Wyvern defense breaks, we have Furious. He's basically Terranor Guard as a 4-star. That's all you need to know. He's got a burn, but he's mainly there for his defense break, and that's it. Next up, we have Blue Dom. So Dom has been changed a couple of times. She does have a stun, AoE, and chance to decrease CR. And she buffs her own speed, so kind of interesting. The problem is, everybody, like 90% of the units right now, feels like they have a stun, or a strip. So if they all strip and stun, why do you just need a stun, right? Like, it just doesn't have enough utility. She does have this reflect skill, which can reflect some damage, but you can also just wait until it falls off, and then it doesn't do anything anymore. So, um, she's not great. She's cute, but she's not used anywhere. So, I don't necessarily recommend building her. Up next, we have Roman. So, Roman is actually really underrated. I've never even built him, and I feel like I've built almost everybody. He's a little bit slow with 105 base speed. He's actually got quite a good kit. He's got dispels all buffs, increases CR of himself by 50%. And then this one is also an AoE that decreases CR by 15% 4 times. So he can be a huge pain to deal with. The problem is that he's water, and there's a lot of element neutral strips out there, and they're all faster. So think like Cerise. Cerise strips and slows you. Which is essentially the same thing, but her skill 3 is element neutral. So for the most part, you're going to use an element neutral, either light dark, or you're going to use like a Cerise type unit that has a passively not vulnerable to element disadvantage instead of him. It's kind of why you don't see him very often. Even Zerato gets more play than him, just because he happens to be a water unit, and getting strips on opposite element stuff is 50-50, and in this game, 50-50 means you're probably never going to proc it. Next, we have Zerato. He has one job, and it's to imprint his brother, Dark Zerato, so doesn't really have any place in the game. He does have a chance to stun with his skill 3 on an AoE, but 50% chance to stun AoE with the ridiculous amount of power creep skills in this game is basically he may as well just not even be there. And finally, for the water units, we have Angelica. Angelica also got an exclusive. She has a very nice skill 3 with immunity and barrier. She has a nice heal. She has a chance to stun on her skill 1. Very good early game unit. This used to be the unit you wanted as your like opening healer in the game. There's so many healers now though that she's not as important as she used to be. She's still good for early game players, but she falls off later game. Whereas before she used to be used all the way through all content, just really not anymore. So unless you're going to use her in your Wyvern team, you can build her, and she's worth 6-starring if you have her, but I wouldn't like stress about getting her or stress about building her. Moving on, green units. Cartouche up first. He's gotten, I don't even know how many buffs, and he's still not worth building. He can do decent damage, but I don't think I've ever seen him win a fight. I wouldn't waste your resources here. You're gonna get better units, so just wait. Don't build him. Purchase is interesting. If you're gonna build somebody that just a random green furry, he's probably the one you'd build. He hits really hard. He also has a stun on his skill 3 here, AoE. But that isn't really what makes him good. What makes him good is his passive. 20% chance to counterattack. Counterattacks with Get Lost, which is a different skill altogether. Inflicts the same debuffs as Falling Strike, which is decrease speed, before 15% chance to stun for 1 turn. So it's very strange. This is AoE though. I don't get. It's so weird because this is not AoE. This is single target. But it says attacks. Oh, same debuffs as Falling Strike. My bad. Okay, so it's basically does his S1 to all 4 units. If he gets hit and then he counters. Plus he's got counterattack set, so like 20% chance to counter plus counterattack set. All of a sudden you have 50% chance to counter. And again, like I said, 50% chance in this game means it happens pretty much every turn. Plus, then he's got a chance to stun you as well. He's a pain to deal with. Honestly, if you're up against him, just leave him till last and hope he doesn't one-shot you or AoE stun you, because he can do a lot of damage with these AoE counters and his skill 3 stun. Moving on. Green Armin we don't see at all. She's not bad though. A little bit slow, 91 speed. She does have a barrier and defense buff with a chance to decrease hit chance and poison, and then an S1 stun. I know people use her in Guild War a lot, but honestly, I don't recommend building her. I think there's just better units out there that can do the same thing as she does. Next up is Sid, another speed imprint. So we've been talking about them a lot. This guy has 126 base speed, which makes him really scary. His speed imprint is only 10, though. So in between the 3 stars and the couple 4 stars we already talked about. He did get a buff that makes him significantly better, and I think people slept on it. He gets a random buff here. 70% chance to grant random buff, skills up to 100%. The random buffs, although that sounds kind of bad, the ones that he gives himself are really good. So increase crit damage, increase effectiveness, increase evasion, or immunity. So the one you probably don't want to proc is effectiveness and immunity. But imagine killing someone with skill 3, because he's only 10 souls to burn into. This does huge damage. And then you proc crit damage buff. And then because you killed someone, you get an extra turn. You can go into your skill 1. He can proc, because you killed someone and gave yourself speed buff here, he procs his like defense break into an extra turn. And if he has crit damage buff as well as speed buff, he's going to nuke somebody with this because his damage is based on speed. So he can double kill here quite easily. He could kill 2 units. He could double kill RB. And he's got a speed imprint, so really good for cleaves. I think he's kind of underutilized in the game right now. He's probably underrated. Next up, we have Leo, and Leo really isn't used anywhere um, other than Banshee. Just there for the defense break on the boss, and that's it. That's all you need to know. If you're trying to build a Banshee one-shot team, he's one of your answers as a turn 2 defense break. Next, we have Silk, and Silk is a unit you get pretty early on. Again, I think she's probably underrated. I think with the new gear, she could actually be decent. She does have a speed buff and a slow. Not many units in the game have that, as she offers both. Problem is, she's kind of squishy, doesn't bring much else to the table. But if you built her to keep her alive, I bet you she'd be fun in RTA. But that's probably it. RTA and like PvE content are probably your only two things, and honestly, probably not RTA unless you're just trying to have fun. But for PvP content or PvE content, sorry, she's really good. Speed buff and speed slow are both very good buffs and debuffs to have. Basically means you're gonna get 2 turns to the enemy 1. Then we have Greenlots. Greenlots doesn't get much play, but I know people do use him to clear Abyss content. I never built mine, even though I have one triple S in storage. You just don't need to if you have Oxlots, because you could just use Oxlots and do the same job. Some people will use him and Oxlots together in like a double Sirmia team for PvP. You can do that as well if you want to. Outside those two things, though, he really doesn't have a place in the game. So, unless you have plans to use him with Sirmia to do PvP, or you need him for the extra turns in Abyss, then don't build him until you need him. Next, we have Rin. Rin, kind of scary to deal with. People that use her in PvP build her really tanky, and usually on counterattack, and then she has a whole bunch of these random buffs, and you just never know what she's going to do. The inability to predict what she's going to do makes her hard to deal with, because you can think that you're fine, and then all of a sudden she grants these 2 random buffs for 3 turns and heals all allies, and like all of a sudden the entire enemy team will have evasion, or the entire enemy team will have greater attack, and because you don't know what's coming, you can't really prepare for it, and that makes it really scary. Like just randomly them not having attack buff on their team and you thinking you're safe, and then all of a sudden all their damage dealers have greater attack, like they'll just wipe you. So be aware of her. I recommend building her. She's fun. I've never really used her very much, but she doesn't have a defense break. It's just too much RNG for my liking personally. But if you have really good RNG, go for it. All right, that is it for the regular element. 4 stars. Let's move on to the ones that you're probably here for, and that's the ML unit. So first one up, Free Spirit Tieria. You get her early. She's a good farmer early, and that's it. I wouldn't ever even 6-star her early. I would bring her to 5-star, use her while you need her. Because you do get her early on, she'll be one of your first units, and then don't bother 6-starring her. General Purchase, the best Wyvern tank in the game. He's also a decent bruiser for RTA, as he does have a passive that every time he gets hit, he CR boosts the entire team. Plus, he's got an attack buff that also has a chance to stun. But mainly, his main thing is Wyvern tank. You put him up front, and every time he gets hit by the boss, who hits 3 times every turn, he'll boost your team 3 times because you're hitting him the 3 times. So that's his main spot in the game. Next, Crimson Armin. So Crimson Armin, very unique ability, putting up invincibility and immunity on the team. She's kind of prevalent right now in RTA. She seems to find her way in and out of the meta. She's mainly used in full-out stall comps, just trying to survive until the enemy dies. So if you're running like quad tank teams or quad revive teams, she's usually one of the units in those comps. not only for the invincibility, but also because she has this damage reduction. Decreases damage received by all allies by 10%, and it does skill up another 5%, so up to 15%. And a lot of skills like this are critical damage, decreases critical damage. Hers is just damage, so this increases or decreases fixed damage as well. Fighter Maya. Fighter Maya, one of the more fun units to use in the game because she has an insane animation as well. She basically turns her little mallet here into a baseball bat and launches you out of the stadium. The problem is it's ultra conditional. You can use it at any time, but it doesn't really do any damage until the enemy is below 30% HP. In which case they're probably dead anyway, and she does big damage at that point, but they probably would have died regardless. So kind of hard to use. She is a good light tank though. If you're trying to light tank for some of the dark units in Guild War, you can do that. And she is defense scaling, so she is hard to kill. Plus, she has a self cleanse, so she's good. She's just a little tricky to use. Next, we have Tempest Siren. A lot of people hate this unit because she's really hard to deal with. If you don't have the right units in your team, you need to have a way to deal with her. If you just go into a Guild War and there's a Tempest Siren there and you didn't bring a way to deal with her, you're going to die, and it's your own fault. Because there's plenty of ways to deal with her. We can talk about that really in another video, but basically any double hitters will deal with her. Her skill 3 hits really hard, plus she's a thief, so she can use basket and potentially proc greater attack, or she can be put on Moonlight Dreamblade and have evasion, both of which are viable and you never really know until it's too late. But her skill 3 has a buff block and a silence at the same time, AoE. So if she gets a turn, she's either going to A, kill you, or B, she's going to buff block you and block you from doing any of your skills, which, can completely lock you down. And by the time you get out of it, she could be back on her skill 3 again, do it again, and then you'll be dead. What makes her good is this. Basically, you can't do more than 51% of the max HP, so you need to hit her twice. And every time she drops under 70%, she puts herself in stealth. So you either need to go twice in a row, first one hitting her, second one with an AoE, but she does get a CR boost in between, so you have to be way ahead of her. And also use someone that just hits twice. So like Alencia's skill 1 hits twice, ML Lulu hits twice, stuff like that. Fire Mercedes hits twice. All those skills that hit twice can deal with her quite easily. Also, people tend to build her on lifesteal, so if she does get a turn, she heals back up past the 50% mark, and then you have to hit her twice again. So keep that in mind. Up next, Wander Silk. So Wander Silk is just a speed unit, usually used to speed contest when you do see her, although you don't see her a lot in PvP. She is quite good, and pretty good in PvE as well. She does have an exclusive, and I believe the exclusive is speed, because her speed really isn't fast enough to do her job as is, so I think she gets another 10 speed from her exclusive, putting her at 122. That means you just give her your fastest gear with some effectiveness. She can go first, and she can do this skill. Her exclusive also provides a strip. So strip inflicts silence, blocks heal, and decreases their CR by 100%. So not only are you locking them down by stripping and silencing them, but you're also bringing them to 0 CR. So whoever was going first, whether it be like a Cerise or whoever, they now have 0 CR, and then when they do get a turn, they can't do their skills anyway. So they're essentially missing 2 turns, which is quite scary to deal with if she does happen to go first and land on you. Problem being, she has to land the strip, and she has to land the silence, and she has to land the pushback. So you get 3 chances to get 15%ed, and again, that's going to happen probably more than you're comfortable with. But when it works, it's really nice. Next, Watcher Shuri, another speed imprint. Again, 10 speed, same as Sid. He's famous for skill 3. Skill 3, just full out ignore defense. 100% ignore defense, single target. If he's built properly, he can one-shot any unit in the game. He does have very low base attack. at 970. So that's fully 6-star and awakened. So the problem is you've got to get his attack high enough, and you probably don't want him to be too slow either, or else he's just never going to get a turn. A lot of people will run Sachet on him, the 4-star artifact, in order to kind of boost him into a turn in a cleave. So like, kill somebody, he boosts himself with his artifact, and then he gets a turn. Um, He's very good, but make sure you have a team to go with him. He won't just solo things. He is just this very squishy single target damage dealer. A note on his low base attack, I actually have him on a flat attack ring, and it makes him better if you have a high attack percent substat. So keep that in mind if you're building him. Up next, AOL, one of the only, actually the only light 4-star I don't have. Only 4-star so far I don't have, actually. And she's really good. So she's a mage. She can hold a variety of different artifacts, including book. But this is a non-attack skill that strips, applies buff block, and applies silence. So we talked about how devastating buff block and silence can be on Siren. But this can't, one, you can't evade it. Two, she's element neutral, so you still can't evade it that way. And three, she strips, so immunity can't block it. So people just build her high effectiveness and high speed, and she just strips, silences everybody, and then their entire team does their thing. You miss your turn, and then if she's fast enough, she probably cycles around and does it again before you've even lost the buff block in the first place. So she can be very hard to deal with. Plus, if you hit with an AoE, she will cleanse everybody of one debuff and put up skill null on everybody. So even if you get one turn off, it's probably not enough. And then if that wasn't annoying enough, she has a skill 1 silence with a pushback. That CR pushback on her skill 1 seems to have more effect than the silence most of the time, but can be very useful keeping your team at bay. So very scary, hard units to deal with, and usually built with enough of speed and effectiveness that it's going to be a pain. Up next, we have a very RNG unit in Benevolent Roman. He can be very good, just like his brother. Just like his brother, he has a strip into debuffs. This is strip into silence. He can also burn into an extra turn. His extra turn, well, his skill 1 can proc into an extra turn as well. So if he starts popping off, he goes skill 3, strips everybody, silences everybody, burns, gets an extra turn. Skill 1s, procs his extra turn on top of that. His extra turn attacks all enemies, decreasing CR by a random amount, which means it's going to mess up your turn order. And because you burned into skill 3, this 4-turn cooldown is now a 3-turn cooldown. And it's a crazy nonsense mess of things going on. If he gets going, it's a pain. Thankfully, he's only 112 base speed. He's relatively easy to outspeed. And you can still cleanse all this, so you can still resist it as well. So if they're trying to be fast enough to outspeed you, he probably won't have enough effectiveness to land. So those are the two ways of dealing with them. Up next is Geither. So Geither is an exclusive as well. She is kind of an interesting unit. Nobody ever uses her, but she does have a nuke skill 3. This hits really hard, especially if you burn into it. It's only 10 souls, and she's a mage. Very unique kit in that the only damage dealer that can nuke and provide attack buff at the same time, single target. Now Mercedes can skill 3 and provide attack buff, but this is actually quite a unique skill, being able to bring book. It would allow you to do things in arena like nuke, kill somebody, give your team attack buff, and then still have 10 souls left over and burn into someone like Arby, who you've now given attack buff to. So you can pull off some very unique teams using Geither. Problem is very, very squishy, 4-star base stats, and does require pretty good gear. There is a heal here with a barrier. I'm sorry, this is just a barrier. Yeah, this is just a barrier. This one has a heal. So Geither actually carried me through some early content in in Labyrinth when I wasn't able to get through it yet, when I was like a brand new player, because of the heal. But other than that, high powered damage dealer. I actually had a lot of fun using her in RTA because people don't expect it and they just leave her in and then she nukes you. And you know they feel bad losing to Geither, but not as bad as everybody thinks. Also for PvE has a slow on the skill 1 to go along with the shield, the continuous heal, the heal, and the damage. Actually really good kit for PvE, plus the exclusive. And final light unit, we have Dingo. Dingo's scary. If you face Dingo in RTA, he is going to be a monster. Because they're probably burning into him, and if they burn into him, he's going to have greater attack. I believe it's from his exclusive. But he provides invincibility, gives himself greater attack, takes an extra turn, and then can AoE nuke you. And then proc another extra turn into somebody else. So it can be very scary and very hard to deal with. Just don't underestimate him and assume that, oh, I'll just leave him in. No, I'll be fine, because he will one-shot your entire team if you let him get that combination off. And final element, we are into the dark units. Happen to have all the dark units. The only 4-star I'm missing is actually that AOL. First up, we have Assassin Cartouche. Actually quite good. He has evasion passive for your entire team of 15%. Plus, he has a skill 3 that has a stun and a defense break. People will use him counter cleave to try and give themselves a chance to evade nukes. I don't necessarily agree with that strategy. I think you're better off building him more as a bruiser and a defense break and stun control type unit. Probably very fast, but he's decent. Just provides some good utility, does some stuff. His passive also means every time he moves, the first attack after he moves, he can't be, or is going to be evaded. So it can make him very hard to kill later in a fight. So keep him in mind. Next, we have Kiwana. One of the cuter designs in the game. I just wish she had a place. She was restrict on skill 1. We talked about this with one of the 3-stars. I forget who it was. Used in Katie's, but that's it. She doesn't really have a place anywhere else. She does have a cleanse and a speed buff and a barrier, but it's just not enough to use in any PvP content. But really, pretty much just a Katie's farmer. Inferno Quazu is next. He's got a very interesting passive that allows him to self-cleanse once AoE'd. After suffering an attack that targets all allies, dispels all debuffs. So it's going to dispel all debuffs, give him his Vigor buff, which increases his own attack and defense by 30%, and then he can use this to nuke. So when he has Vigor, it becomes irresistible as well. So he can just guaranteed strip, put up 2 burns, and detonate 2 burns, and whoever he's going after is probably going to die. The problem with that is you can play around it. So he's got to land 3 things. He's got to land the strip. He's got to land 2 burns on top of it. So he has 3 chances to get resisted if you haven't AoE'd first. So people tend to hold on to this. Primarily, he's a Guild War offense unit where you can control what's going on and you know when they're going to do something. Because in RTA, he's just too easy to play around. Like, people will wait until he gets his turn, and then once he gets his turn, he doesn't have immunity anymore, and they'll just stun him, or nuke him, or kill everybody else and just wait for him to do nothing in the fight. So there's a lot of ways around him in RTA. But for Guild War offense, he's really good. Next up is Clarissa. Clarissa is the queen of Hall of Trials. You see her in pretty much every Hall of Trials team. She also gets a lot of play in Tower, in Abyss. She has a full cleanse and immunity, self-immunity on her skill 3. And her skill 1 allows you to team up with the unit with the highest attack every single time if she has her little loveliness buff here. So she also has a strip on her skill 2. Not used all that often, but if you need it, it's there. And it can ignore res if you burn into it, which is nice. But primarily, she's used for the cleanse If you are using her in PvP, you're using her for that cleanse because you can put her on Strax since she's a warrior and give yourself the bonus res. Give yourself very high chance to resist debuffs. Just cleanse and then S1 into an extra turn or into a team attack and hopefully kill somebody. So good unit, but primarily PvE. Next is Shadow Rose. I had such high hopes for this girl when they buffed her. They gave her a buff where this is on a 3-turn cooldown, and if you burn into it, which only takes 10 souls, you can do it every single turn. This does have a strip into a defense break with her exclusive, and being able to strip defense break every single turn, in theory, is really, really good. The problem is you need the souls, and she doesn't have crazy base speed. She's actually kind of slow at 107 base speed. So, and her skill 3 is not bad. It has a boost for your team and a pushback on their team. She really should be good in like bruiser comps. The problem is that she's taking up a spot. So if it was a 5-unit team, I think she'd be really good. But for a 4-unit team, she's kind of hard to use. Next, Troublemaker Crowsit. We talked about Crimson Armin being part of tank comps, and so is this guy. So part of the quad tank comps he's another option. He protects the back unit. Basically makes it impossible to hit them. He also has a stun on his S1, a lot of passive damage reduction, a real pain to deal with. Honestly, if you're going into him, just bring out QC and kill him. It's usually the way to go, but he can be very annoying. Where'd he go? He disappeared. Oh, there he is. Okay. Assassin Sid up next. One of the fastest damage dealers in the game at 128 speed, tied for the second fastest in the game. Overall, his skill 3 will silence units, and because he's so fast, he's probably going to go first. So he's usually used to counter cleaves. So if somebody brings in like an Operator Sigrid or an ML Lulu, they will bring Assassin Sid and just try and nuke that unit before they move. And if they don't die, he does have a silence, plus he gives himself evasion, and he can steal souls as well. Yeah, removes 20 souls from the opponent. So if they brought Book on one of their mages, using him to get rid of those souls can also interrupt what they're trying to do. So mainly a counter cleave unit. Now, Assassin Collie, very similar, also very fast, a little bit slower than Sid, 2 speed faster, 126 speed, but using the same sort of vein. She also has a silence, but her silence goes on everyone that you don't hit. So her actual skill is still single target, still based on speed, but it stuns. But if it kills, then it'll put up silence on everybody else. Obviously, still blockable by immunity, but very interesting kit. Instead of giving herself evasion like Sid does, she goes into stealth, which means that if there's no AoEs, she's a great option because she can go first and then put herself into stealth, and they have no way to get her out of stealth, and she can just walk around and pop your entire team. Really good option for some of those tank comps that don't have AoEs. And her S1 actually does really good damage as well. The difference between the two, I guess while we're here, he's more counter cleave, whereas she's more offensive. So if you were going against like a bunch of single target bruisers, like if you're going into one of those quad tank comps with like maybe Sea Armin, Crozit, Crow, and somebody else, she would be a great option, whereas Sid would just die because his evasion would fall off, and then that would be it. Next, we have BBK. So BBK, very good unit now. She got a buff that gives herself this immortality at the start of the fight, which means that in a cleave, usually people will bring her counter cleave, but in a cleave, if they AOE, she's going to take damage, and then she's not going to die, and her skill 3 damage increases based on how much damage she's taken. So as her HP goes down, her damage goes up. So you have to be really aware of her HP levels and whether or not she has the immortality still, and whether you're going to strip it or all those things. You can play around it pretty easily if you're paying attention, but if you're not paying attention, it can be a problem. Also, pretty good for Guild War offense because you can control it, right? If they're trying to cleave you, you can just let them, and she'll take the damage and then nuke. So kind of fun for Guild War offense. Then we have Rin. Speaking of fast units, 126 base speed, same as Assassin Collie, but she's not really a damage dealer. Although you could build her as one. She has a strip here. This is strip giving your entire team immunity for 2 turns, and gives herself an extra turn when she strips. And her extra turn, she has this, which can also strip. But if there's no buffs to strip, she can stun. Or if there's no immunity, I should say, she can stun. It'll stun first and then steal. So, in terms of damage dealer builds, I used to use her into Kairon, who we don't really see much anymore. But basically, I would use her skill 3 to knock him low. And then, because I'd be stripping immunity, she'd get an extra turn. And then she'd use this, and she'd actually strip his immortality, proc and strip his immortality, and then and stun him, so he would never be able to move. So really interesting combination on offense, but primarily she's used just to go first, either to block Polly, because Polly's going to counter you and decrease your buff durations by 1 turn, and she has 2 turn immunity. So basically locks down Polly because she can strip, absorb the Polly strip, and then stun the Polly right after. So nice combination there. Or just to go first and strip stun their fastest unit as well. Almost done. 7 units to go. Alright, Roaming Warrior Leo. Very underrated still. He was very, very bad, like worst 4-star in the game for a long time. But he had an interesting buff. He has a strip. It's not a full strip, but decreased buff durations by 1 turn, which means it will strip immunity. And then after stripping immunity, puts up a bomb. Now, his bombs, because of the way he has to be built, don't do a lot of damage because he's not really going to be built as a damage dealer because he's your strip, right? You could build him to like pair with Oxalots. You could build him really slow. Oxalots boost him into his bombs and do it that way. I know I tried to do that because his S3 you can burn in an extra turn, and his X2 is a detonation. Unfortunately, the detonation is only single target. This should probably be AoE, but it's not. So basically, you would burn, get the extra turn, and then you can only detonate one of the bombs, which does guarantee a stun. But more likely, you're going to build him fast as a stripper. That also happens to apply bombs and slow. So that's how I use him. I use him in RTA sometimes. It is skill up to 100% chance. So he strips, puts up bombs, pairs very, very well with Samurai Zerato, who we're going to talk about in our next video, in the 5-star video. So stay tuned for that part of it. But yeah, Leo actually quite strong, even if Izeri gets banned. Just having those bombs out there that you know are going to stun and ignore res is quite nice. And he cycles decently fast. If you build him with high enough effectiveness, he has a decreased defense on his skill 2 as well. I like running him into like maid comps with really high effectiveness and putting that stripping and putting that bomb up on maid and then being able to stun. Next we have Oxalots. Oxalots used to be the king of cleave. Not so much anymore because there's a lot of things that kind of stop him now, or at least slow him down. But he's still very good. One of the best Guild War units in the game. I still use him every single Guild War. And still pretty good in RTA. You just don't see him as often, but he's still scary and hard to deal with. He can hold book, but primarily what he's known for is his skill 2, being able to boost any teammate from 0 CR to 100 and give them attack buff at the same time. So plus he's a mage, so he can hold book. So you'd be able to burn into that unit as well. So anyone you want to get a turn, he's gonna give you that turn. Next, Celestial Mercedes. So Celestial Mercedes used to be the better of the 2 Mercedes. Now she's not anymore. She still does huge damage though. If you're running a Bassar defense break nuke team, which is kind of standard for most games, she's the best in slot damage dealer. But those kind of comps don't really play as much in Epic 7 as they do in other games. This does do huge damage if she's built on a rage set, and paired with like Basar and Blue Tywin. Like I said, she's the best damage dealer in the game for that, but you don't see it very often. That comp rarely works. There's just too much RNG to make those kind of comps work, and that's why you never see them. Also, she's so squishy and doesn't really have the base stats to be support being used anywhere else either. Although she could be used as a farmer early game. Next up, we have Cdom. Cdom, one of the best cleave units in the game. Very good enabler for cleaves. She's gonna help all your teams work. Um, you need a way to get from your opener fast units to your slow damage dealers, and she's usually the answer. So she can also happen to do one-shot capable damage, but she doesn't even have to. She doesn't even need to kill anybody if she doesn't want to. Basically, every time someone on your team crits, she gets 15% CR. Nope, 10% CR. So if it's an AoE attack, hits 4 people, she gets 40% CR automatically. Plus, it gives her stacks on her damage as well. Then she gets turn. She uses this skill 3, which gives herself 50% crit rate. So you can build her with only 50% crit, and the rest of it just pure damage. And then she, on top of that, on top of giving herself crit chance, she also CR boosts the rest of the team, and then can nuke. So it's this S1 hits really, really hard, especially if it's got a bunch of stacks from boosting her into a turn. So basically, she could be slow with the rest of your team with just one opener. She gets boosted up to the top with the crits, and then she boosts the rest of your team up to the top, plus she kills somebody, and she's a mage and can hold book. So very good unit, but she does have non-attack skills, so you have to be aware of other units that either block souls or block non-attack skills. Then we have Champion Zerato, probably one of the better PvE units in the game, as he has this passive that stops you from being debuffed. He's immune to stun, sleep, and decreased hit chance. Plus, he will take any other debuffs that do land on him, and his S1 can transfer them back to the enemy. And he happens to counter every single time you land one of those debuffs on him. So if I'm trying to think who that would be good against, say you run Cerise into him, the slow and the restrict, he'll take the slow and restrict, he'll put it back on her and on one other unit as well. Plus, he's got an AoE defense break on his skill 3. People normally run him on lifesteal to keep him alive. In terms of debuff comps, he can be hard to kill. For the most part, though, this is a PvE unit, as most PvP teams can work around him or just ignore him. So keep that in mind, but it's still top tier for most PvE content. Then we have Shooting Star Kitties, the only 4-star reviver, unless I'm missing one, but I'm pretty sure the only 4-star reviver. She is used in meme comps with warriors that can proc the ability to keep their buffs up, but outside of that, basically just gives immortality with revive and has a full heal and HP balance on her skill 3. And this is a cleanse now as well, so it's actually quite good. If you don't have Ruel or Mage, she is the next best option. And finally, after the revive, we have a revive blocker in Angelica. Not only is she a revive block, whenever she has this immortality up, which is 3 torn immortality she gives herself, whenever she has it up, any unit that dies can't be revived. When that falls off, they can revive in the meantime, but then she can just put it back up again. But I think she could also, on top of being a block revive for PvP, I think she could also be used in other content. I know she is in a lot of Hall Trials teams because her skill 1 has a team up similar to Kitty Clarissa with the highest attack unit. That's again when this is up. Cassius, stop. Go lay down. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I think you could use it, like I said, in other PvE content because she does have a speed buff and attack buff for the entire team plus the team ups. You could make her heal a little bit. She's a Soul Weaver. I'm sure you could find a way to use her in other PvE content as well. I just don't use her very often anywhere. But if I was using her and when I was using her, it was always in RTA. But yeah, that's going to be it for today's video, guys. That is all of the 4-star units in the game. Next time up, next video will be all the 5-star units. You can see there's more 5-star units than there is 4-star units, and I'm sure that's what most of you want to see anyway. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to like and comment on this one. Let me know if I missed anything, or if you don't agree with any of the opinions in the video, down in the comment section below. And we'll see y'all next time. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye for now, guys.